asset store. A lot of developers I know are pretty dirty about the asset store, mainly because there's a lot of games that you see out there on the App Store that are simply built from assets that have been bought from the asset store. I don't agree with this at all. One of the assets that I used building Spiraloid was called Choreographer, and that's what I used to sync the music to the gameplay. Every time you hear a beat, the spikes move up and down. You jump exactly to the beat on every fourth note. So yeah, if I were to develop that myself, I think I probably wouldn't have been able to. So other people who build these great assets that aren't included in Unity, and you might feel that you don't have the skills to do, go out and buy it from someone who's already done it, and it's battle tested, essentially. Free to play versus premium. When I first started game development, there was no such thing as free to play. Games like Fruit Ninja and Angry Birds were selling for 99 cents. Well, there were other games that were selling for $5 to $10. They had the idea that if we charge as little as possible, then we'll get as most people in as possible. But as I developed, I saw things change, specifically when Crossy Road came out. And they weren't the first guys to do it, but they were the first guys to do incentivize ads really well. You watch this ad, I'll give you some coins. You've just died, watch an ad, you can continue, so on and so forth. And that's exactly what I did with Spiraloid to monetize the game. Doing it all by yourself. It's game development by yourself is a really hard thing to do. I have to say it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. But it's also one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life. It's something I've always wanted to do, especially being a gamer my entire life. And I can say I've done it, which is a great thing. But would I do it again? I'd only do it if I had a game that was a smaller scope than Spiraloid. Even though it's a fairly simple game, it was just a big challenge to complete all by myself. But in the future, I'd definitely look at collaborating. Publishing. Now, this is an interesting place to go. When I first started Spiraloid, I wasn't even going to approach publishers. But within that first 24 hours of being featured on Touch Arcade, I got approached by 4. Now, they do have probably about as many pros as they have cons. The worst thing about a publisher is the profit split. They want at least 50-50. So if you do go ahead and make your own game all by yourself, a publisher wants to take half of everything that it makes. And yeah, that's not a really good deal. But then they do come with industry expertise. They know people. They can more likely get it featured on the App Store, and they can also cross-promote between their own games. But the other disadvantage that you have is that your game will be put out under the name of the publisher and not yourself. So the only time that people will see your name is essentially on the splash screen or in the credit screen. So I ended up going, as I said before, with a consultant. I self-published. It's up on the App Store as my name. It got featured, and I pay much less than a publisher would want. And the last tip is simply to have fun. That's why I got into gaming. I got into developing games, I should say. It's really rewarding, challenging, and it is fun. You know, it's not fun all of the time. It's really not fun most of the time, actually. But the best thing is when you take it to places like Beer and Pixels, which I did a couple of times over the development, and the feedback that I got from there was invaluable. But watching people play your game and even getting negative feedback's not too bad, but when you get people who are really getting into it and you've handed them your iPad and you can't get it back off them, that's really cool. But yeah, that's pretty much it. take a round of questions if you've got any questions.
Was it always going to be rhythm based? Was the music there from the start?
No, it wasn't. I'm not sure when I had the idea to make it rhythm, but actually it was when I put a soundtrack in there. I thought it'd be great if you could jump to the beat. So I did a little research on how I could do it myself, and it was going to be far too hard. The plugin that I used, Choreographer, I had it up and running within about 2 hours. So it probably added maybe about 2 months of development time, but at the end of the day, I think it was well worth it.
What's the hardest thing that you've done in that project?
In Spiraloid?
Yeah. Simon, could you repeat the question?
Sorry.
It's just like...
Yeah, absolutely. The hardest thing that I did in Spiraloid. Pulling everything together. The thing that you really don't realise until you start game developing, especially if you're doing it by yourself, is that you have to be absolutely on top of every single aspect of it. The way that the GUI performs in every aspect. When you pause a game, what does it do? How do you save high scores to Game Center? All that sort of thing. The individual parts were quite easy, but everything together, making sure that worked, that was the most difficult. Some days I would break the entire game. That's where you have to save it. Make sure you save iterations all the time. But yeah, making sure everything worked was the hardest part of it.
Were you ever close to bringing in like some help, like a friend, or were you always just solo, like, I'm doing this myself?
Yeah, very interesting question. The question was, did I ever consider bringing anyone else in to help develop? At times I did. When I felt a little overwhelmed, like I built my first prototype track, and then I thought, how many levels do I have to put into this? And I thought, let's put about 7 in there. And that's the point when I thought, yeah, I don't know if I can do this myself. I paced myself, and I knew I could do a level probably every half week, so it wasn't too bad. The more complex the levels got, the more time it took. But that's the only time I really considered it. But it was fleeting, you know. The most challenging part of it was the coding. What made that easier was using Playmaker. Its visual scripting is so intuitive, and you can see visually where your code is at every stage, and that was fantastic. I really I couldn't have done it without Playmaker. But yeah, no, I'm happy that I did it all myself. More than anything else is because I really wanted to prove it to myself that I could actually do it. You know, I wasn't too what's the word for it? Egotistical to say, well, I really need someone, but I'm not going to do it because I want to do it by myself. If I needed help, I would have got help. And I can say now, for the next game that I work on, I will definitely collaborate with at least one other person, if not more. Basically, if you have a good coder and a good artist, hypothetically, you'll do it in less than half the time than you could do it all by yourself. So, yeah.
Sorry, when you were during the early stages of the 3 publishers, how valuable was the consultant's advice to you, and where you would have ended up if you were on one of the publishers instead? His feedback was really valuable.
The way that he gave me the feedback as well is probably one of the main reasons that I went with him, because every time he gave me feedback on a new beta that I'd release, he would give me feedback saying, you know, you should make the transitions between game over to starting again quicker. Even aesthetic things like when the orb rolls around the spiral, you can see it indent each individual part of the spiral. He said that'd look cool. And so I implemented all of those things. And I think it is a much better game for it. But he never pressured me to say, you know, I need this game, you need to come with me. It was more like friend to friend talking. And after I dealt with a few publishers, one of which wanted, I said, we got to the point where, okay, let's talk. And they said, okay, 60-40 split. I said, oh, it's not too bad. And they said, no, 60 to us, 40 to you. And you can imagine the word that I used after that. But this is what you deal with publishers. Publishers saw the post on Touch Arcade, and they pounced really quickly. That's why I got 4 in 24 hours, because they knew we've got to get in there first. We want to capitalise from this, and you know that if they're going 50-50, they're really only in it for themselves. You know, so they do have contacts at the App Store, that's for sure. But a contact at the App Store doesn't necessarily mean everything, because there is absolutely no guarantee that you're going to get that feature. And if you don't get a feature, you're going to get no exposure. You know, you have to pay for your exposure, and it's not, in a free-to-play game, it's not worth paying for exposure. So, yeah, going with Mike was really good. I can tell you that his cut that he takes is 15%, which is a lot better. You'll never find a publisher who will expect 15%. So, self-publishing, it's out in my name, it got featured, and I got some really great advice. That was awesome. I couldn't ask for anything more.
Just how long after you released it, did it become a feature?
Okay, so another really valuable thing that Mike told me is that his process of putting games up onto the App Store is you need to give them 3 weeks grace. So what you do, you email, when you've finished and you've submitted it to the App Store, you email, I think it's promotions at apple.com, I think it is. You can do a Google search, you'll find the specific email address. That's if you haven't got a contact at Apple. Mike did, so he emailed his contact. You give them a breakdown of why your game's great, and you give them the release date, which is on the Thursday, 3 weeks from the time that you sent that out. The specific reason for that is you need to give the editors at the App Store time to actually play it and make a decision whether or not they want to feature the game. So if you notify them and on the Monday and you release it on the Thursday, you are never going to get the feature. So it's one of those things that you really have to go through to get that, to try. Your best shot at getting that feature is that 3 weeks grace, if not longer. Anyone? Bueller?
Is that your music?
That track wasn't. That was, I used, what did I use? I used a dance music plugin for Logic by a company called 8DO. But I did compose 2 of the tracks in the game. When you first play the game, I think it's the level's called Amethyst. I composed that track, and the second level you get up to, Obsidian, I composed that one as well. The reason that I didn't do the rest is it probably wouldn't be out yet. So,
Sorry,
Sure.
another question. So in your work schedule, you're doing the art and the programming.
Yep.
Did you split up your day, like in the morning I'll do art and then in the afternoon I'll program, or just whatever had to be done you did?
I actually owe my time management to my wife. So I'd finish a beta, I'd play test it with the beta testers, myself and specifically my wife. Then either from feedback or from my own feedback, I would write out a to-do list of what I need to do. And the to-do list would be broken down with if there are any bug fixes or any features that I need to add, or long-term, what levels I need to do, all that sort of thing. and she would actually collate that and put it in an order of magnitude. She'd ask me, okay, how long would this take? You know, adding the sounds to the spikes, or sound effects in general, or those sort of things. I said, I don't know, maybe an hour. So she'd write, right, 2 hours then. And so for everything that I gave her a time for, she'd double that. So then at the end of that, I've got this to-do list, and I've got, okay, about 5 days to do this to-do list. And I typically hit that in about 5 days, because I thought it would take half the time, and it never really does. Always takes not necessarily twice as long, but my worst enemy is myself, because I'm a perfectionist, and that's something that you kind of have to leave at the door to a degree if you want to finish these things.
Sorry for you, but how long were you in that beta/pulse stage after your feature?
So I started the test flight beta in October, and that ran till December. So only really 3 months. But yeah, it was generally an interesting thing about beta testing, especially public beta testing, is I initially got about 150 outside beta testers, and for each beta I put out, I could see the numbers of people downloading it, and for every new beta I put out, there were less and less people that were downloading it. So by the end, I think the last beta I put out, I think only about 30 of those testers downloaded it. Sure.
Was making the assets really quick?
Yes. Yeah, making the assets was actually the quickest part of it. That's one thing that I should have put in my talk was I made a very conscious decision not to put characters in this game. And it's a really good idea for a first game that you don't do characters. If any of you guys have done animation or rigging or modeling, texturing, UV layout, you've got to do it all, and then you've got to make a game. So doing characters by yourself for your own game, not the best thing to do. So because they're spheres, it was easy enough just to build as many different types of orbs as I could. I'd have an entire day where I'd open up Blender, I'd start modeling and start doing something crazy. I think I've got, at the moment, there's 9 levels, so there's 9 different spheres and 9 different levels. The way that I built the spiral is that it's off a master prefab that I can I duplicate, and then I make whatever crazy shapes I want out of that. I deform it back onto a spline, and then I output it from Blender as a static object with a pivot right in the middle of where the spiral would be. Each section of the spiral is offset forward by about 1 unit, and because there's 16 in a full 360 rotation, it's offset in the Z rotation by 22.5 degrees. So the assets were built and baked in Blender, and then I coded the spiral to propagate itself. So yeah, it was a pretty quick process of doing the graphics. But the first and last update that I did, I pushed a little bit further. I made a volcano level with lava and a volcano spewing magma, and a space level with asteroids, and a space station that you go through that spins and all that sort of stuff. So I did want to do more, but I had to move on. You know, that's the main thing. If I had built something like Rodeo Stampede, I'd probably be still working on it full time for as long as possible. That's what those guys are doing, and they're like at 70 million downloads. So yeah.
Maybe one more question if anybody's got one.
Sure.
You said you used the code asset to sync the ball movements and the spikes on the music.
Yep.
Did you have to pay them a percentage of the profits?
No.
for using that asset?
No. That's probably, sorry. The question was, did I have to pay the choreographer, the guys who made the asset I used to sync the music to the game? That choreographer comes in two versions. There's a basic version and a pro version. I think the basic version is about $35 US and the pro version is about $120 US, which is pretty steep for an asset, but the amount of time it would take you to build the quality of that asset and be able to plug it into your game as easily as you can is well worth the asking price. So basically, all I did was pay for the asset, and they've got their money, and I've got my asset. So they've featured it on. They've featured the game on their showcase part of their page, and they were actually a finalist in the Unity Awards last year, and they played the Spiraloid trailer as part of their presentation. They didn't win though. I can't remember what asset won, but yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Over to you. Thank you for presenting, and
Thanks for having us.
uh,
Wow, I'm going to go down to the park.
thank you, Simon.
Does anyone want to join me? Thank you.
If you want to ask any other questions, I'm sure Simon got a few minutes to hang around, but
Absolutely.
I appreciate you coming, and wow, that's quite an enlightening journey. Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thanks very much.
How did you sustain yourself for just because your job?
Freelancing. So freelancing in motion graphics. The job that I had working with doing vivid projections, I was charging $600 a day. So, which is really good. So I had saved up enough to be able to sustain, and my wife had savings as well. So it was only 3 months. So, and then the worst part of that is that if it didn't get featured, nothing. So the feature paid off. I made a decent amount of money off it. But yeah, no, savings. It's the only way I could have done it. I don't. Sorry.
What if I do this? Mobile games.
Yep.
I'd be really interested in
Sure.
Especially struggle when they're making proper games now. He would say guys are not even students anymore, but they struggle to get discovery. You know, it's uphill every single bit of the way. Sarah will have an email, right?
Yes, she does.
I'll email you and you can send an email and. But that would be good if we could have a little chat about that.
Absolutely. He basically
he's got to think it's worthwhile.
Exactly. That's what I was just about to say.
You know, he's not going to do it as a charity, right?
Exactly.
No.
Well, he saw the value in exactly.
Have that.
So.